Professor Bordway here, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this term due diligence in architecture. And you might have also heard the term standard of care. And of course, this is referring to all the services that should be rendered on behalf of the architect in a professional manner. And so we go through all the different phases and the services on behalf of the architect, and what should the architect be doing to reflect this due diligence on their behalf. And you can start off with the first meeting between the architect and the client or the owner. And that's going to be the most important meeting, I think, of the whole project, actually, where you sit down and you talk about responsibilities of each party throughout the various phases that the client wants to hire you for. And you verbally advise the client about that, as well as following up in documentation form. And so in this pre-design phase, for example, before designs even began and such, it could be an early stage of the project, you're reflecting to the client all of the specific responsibilities that you, as the architect, would be taking on, as well as the responsibilities of the client. Okay. And most clients or owners feel that they're hiring the architect to do their work for them, and that's not true. So we have to kind of lay that out right away to the client that we are here as to represent ourselves as architects and the specific services that we do and so on. But you, as the owner, need to be at all the meetings and make all the decisions that need to be made appropriately at appropriate time, so that we're not delaying the project. And this is where half of the clients are going to say, well, wait a minute, that's why I hired you to go to those meetings for me and keep me up to date and about the progress of the project and that type of thing. And then again, that's when we have to say, no, you hired us to do architecture, not to be your representative. There is a difference between the architect representing themselves and the owner representing themselves. Architects legally should not really represent the owner. In other words, take on the power of the owner. We can look out for the best interest of the client, and that type of thing, but when we're sitting there in meetings making owner decisions for them, we're in the wrong seat, so to speak. And so it's a matter of communicating this to the client in your first meeting. I use client and owner synonymous, by the way, in my talks. And so you're communicating with the owner about them being at all meetings that need to occur on this project, so that we can have their direction as we need it progressively, so as not to delay the project and such. And if they cannot make all of those meetings, then they need to hire a legal representative, one that can legally represent them, not so much an attorney, but an individual that has their power or can make decisions on the owner's behalf, okay, in their absence. And in that way, that just takes you out of the hot seat. So that's important to do, and communicate that right away to the client. And there's some things we talk about in this first meeting, and that's one of them. And another, of course, is the budget and the schedule of the client. And I asked about 3 days prior to this meeting, I email a list of all the things the client should bring with them to this first meeting in written form. I used to take notes on that information in the past, but not anymore, because it's a different tool when it's submitted to you as the architect by the owner in written form. Okay, so no verbal, right? And so it's a matter of getting the schedule and the budget correct and appropriate as well. And so that is up to us to assess, is this going to be an appropriate budget and schedule for the project? And if it's not, most clients will respect you if you tell them then at the beginning, square one, day one. It's like something has to give. The program has to come down, the budget has to go up, so that it levels out and becomes feasible. And so that's important to recognize, realize, and communicate verbally and in document form. Usually I always say in this profession it's verbal and it's in document form. Verbal to take care of the immediacy, the immediate issue, and then in the document form to take care of you. Because a document really was never meant to be a communication tool. Most people use it that way. Well, I'm going to write them a letter and then the whole issue is taken care of. And you assume that they're going to receive it and they're going to understand it and so on. Now, you can only hold their hand so much, I agree. But the thing is that you need to make sure that you are reflecting your due diligence, standard of care in document form, by advising the client when you need to, okay? And I mean, in this profession, there's things that we need to say at a certain time, and there's things that we don't need to say at a certain time, and who to speak to and who not to speak to, and when to document, when not to document, and so all of this information is good to know, so that you are properly protected. I also am an expert witness on and law cases and such, and one of the first things that is subpoenaed in a case, of course, is all your files and your documents. It's not your verbal agreements, and so it's a matter of making sure that you have good files tracking all the actions throughout the various phases of the project. So that, and that's in computer form and also in hard copy, because no one can ever tell, if your hard drive crashes or if the secondary place that you sent it to somehow lost your files. So it's good to have both formats, computer and also hard copy. In case a computer crashes that day, you can just reach over and grab your file and open it, and you keep that up to date as well. So there's two forms of backup really that you would need or should have. And I'll tell you a quick way of checking your files is that if a client calls you and says, that change order that occurred, 3 months ago, item number 14, can you describe again what that's about? And now the clock is ticking, right? How long will it take you to answer that question is a function of how well your files are organized. So anyway, so due diligence is the action on behalf of the architect to reflect properly professing their services as they need to in a standard professional manner, and of course reflecting the standard of care as well. All right, so it's very important that we reflect in this first meeting to the client about their responsibilities, the architect's responsibilities, and then we go through and talk about the budget and the schedule. Are they going to need a construction manager on this project as well? If so, then that usually dictates a different type of contract to use. Okay, we mentioned also that we should not recommend contractors as well. And so, wait a minute, you've been working in architecture for 30 some odd years. You should know a number of great contractors. Why don't you go ahead and put a list together for me, Mr. and Mrs. Architect, and then I'll take that from there. And we used to do that a long time ago, and now we don't do it anymore because we don't really need to. We shouldn't. It's up to really the client to collect that data, okay, of a collection of contractors. Now, what I do in this first meeting is I say, well, we don't really recommend contractors. However, you've got about 6 to 9 months before we get to that point where we're going to go out to bid. And so, I recommend that you go and visit their projects and talk with the contractors and put a list of, 12 together. We can long list them and then short list them down to about 5 or 6 on a project and that type of thing. And so I'm giving them the heads up way ahead of time, so to speak, so that they can put their list together, so that when we get halfway into construction documents and getting ready to qualify contractors, I'll ask the client for that list, okay? And so it's important to kind of communicate that to them. Never think that the owner is going to expect something from you and then it's not really discussed at all. There's areas of gray. So you need to get it all out on the table. That's important to do as well, okay? And so it's a matter of going through and taking a look at the contractors, and that will be given to you by the client as well. What level of quality does the client want? So this first meeting is very important, and we're going to, of course, have meeting minutes as well, indicating all the issues that were discussed and that type of thing as well. And then we're going into the other phases, the future phases after that, of course, which would be normally site analysis and schematics and design development and such. And as you're going through these various phases, whatever products you're generating, the progress levels of products you're generating, you should be submitted to the client as well, progressively. Okay, so that's important to do. To understand, and the client needs to understand that as well. Sometimes clients will say, well, you don't need to send me the documents, I trust you, and I'm sure it'll be good design and so on. And then of course we need to say, well, no, by law I need to progressively submit the documents to you for your confirmation that you received them progressively, you signed off on them. Any comments you have, mark on those. And we go from there. So like in our early stages of the project, where we're meeting with our consultants, I'll sit down and talk with them, indicating that I need the big five from them progressively at 20, 40, 60, 80%. And the big five would be the documents that we're generating, which would be drawings, specs, calcs, reports, and their cost estimation. And I'll normally get 3 sets from them, or they can email it or T-line it, whatever, and I'll generate the documents on this end. But I'm sending 2 copies to the owner for their review progressively at 20, 40, 60, 80%, getting them to sign on the documents, confirming the fact they received them, they saw them, then they commented on them, okay, and then that'll be sent back to me. One time, halfway into construction documents, I had a client come up to me and say, you know, where'd you get that floor plan? I didn't approve it. And I know they did, but I had nowhere to go to confirm they did. And so, yeah, I call this the days of the silly stuff. And so now it's a matter of making sure that we are progressively receiving sign-offs and confirmations, doing the due diligence from the client, making sure that they're getting acclimating themselves to eventually understand what they are going to get, the end product, the building. And so it's very important, okay, that the due diligence be generated to reflect the properly practice of architecture, okay. And so, you know, sometimes, you know, when things happen, then you start thinking about, okay, how did that project get over budget or something like that, you know. And then you go back at all your files, and, oh, here's where the client made this change, and here's where the client made this change, and here's where the client made this change. And then you bring all that information to the meeting, to the table, and basically you mention all the reasons why the project is over budget, and the client's going to hit you right about here and say, well, is there a reason why you didn't mention that the budget was being affected when I stated those things way back when? And it's, you know, and so it goes back to, you've got to mention issues when they're happening. It doesn't hold any water. It doesn't hold any water when basically we mention it after the fact. Okay, so we've got to end up making sure that that we're commenting as we need to. As any good attorney or judge will basically indicate to you, the lack of action in certain situations like this is considered to be action, which is negligence. And so it's a matter of making sure that when a client affects the budget and or schedule in any way, or we feel they do, then we say, okay, well, wait a minute, let me research that, because I think you just affected the budget and the schedule, or the level of quality, or the design integrity, or, you know, so we got to speak up, all right? You be there, be present at the meeting, at the job site, with the client, progressively receiving their sign-offs, okay? You never want a client to come back to you and say, well, you never did inform me about that, or I would have done it another way, you know. And so keep in mind there's only 2 entities we take direction from, and one would be the agency. We follow all the laws, codes, regulations, standards, ordinances, and issues like that, and make sure that the documents are in conformance. And the second entity would be the client, the owner. Okay, so as I communicate to the client, direction has been given to me by the agency in the form of laws, codes, regulations, and standards, and I will be coming to you for all of the other decisions, all right? And so as an architect, I'm a presenter, informer, educator, recommender, advisor. I don't decide anything regarding those issues, okay? And so I communicate this to the client as well. And so the client needs to understand that they are the ones that need to be making these decisions. Now, it's up to me as the architect to make sure that they are receiving all the information they need to have to properly make a decision. Now, where do we draw the line on that? I mean, we can go on forever. And so that's where experience and agreement, okay, you've got all the proper information to make a decision here regarding the structural system or the HVAC system. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Client, what's it going to be? Get them to sign off on, you know, confirming that they're agreeing to that system. Okay, always getting their sign-offs. Okay, you want to have a bookload of sign-offs from the client, you know, whether it's faxed information to them and they can fax back, or whatever it happens to be. Okay, the verbal stuff doesn't work. You know, go ahead, take the documents in, and I'll follow up with approval later. It's like, no, we don't work that way. So in the first meeting with the client, going back, talking about fee schedule, talking about when we need approvals, all of that, okay, to reflect the proper standard of care and the due diligence. Okay, now the due diligence also will be continuously checking the documents for accuracy, conformance, compliance as well. Okay, making sure that we are on with our information and confirming that with the client. Visiting the job site progressively during construction phase at intervals to the stage of construction, as AIA calls it. In other words, appropriate meetings, but I wouldn't leave it there. I would communicate exactly how often that translates into to the client. Is it once a month, twice a month, once a week? You know, so you have to make sure that in your contract, don't leave it out, spell it out. Okay, and so we want to make sure that the contract is specifically indicating our services as well as the clients. We can indicate all the services that would not be included in this contract as well, not leaving any gray area. We also, with our contracts, include a sheet index, all the drawings that they'd be receiving, okay, and as well as a time frame, you know, that type of thing. So we spell it all out, and it's important to keep the channels open of communication between the architect and the owner and the agency to make sure that there's no misunderstandings. And the contractor and CM as well, once we get into construction. You know, for an architect to sit there and wait for a CM and a general contractor to call them, then, you know, I question the ego issue on behalf of the architect. So pick up the phone, talk with the people. You know, nowadays we're so techy that we'll just email them instead of talking with them. You'd be amazed when you have a conversation, a verbal live conversation with someone, how much information really is disclosed, which translates probably to about 100 emails. And so it's a matter of, can you just pick up the phone, keep in touch with all the parties you need to, all right, and watch out for not or speaking with people that you should not be speaking with as well. Subcontractors, material suppliers, third-party people. You know, when the client asks you to go to the meeting for them and meet with the future tenants of a building or something like that, then of course that's how I have to communicate with the client. I'm sorry, I can't do that. I can facilitate, set up the meeting, but the real meeting is between you and those people. I don't want to get in the middle of that. I call it crossfire. It's a dangerous position. And so as long as the client is advised and informed about what they need to do, should do, responsibilities and such, then that's good to know as well, all right? And so everything on the table, channels of communication open, keep your confirmations in written form, approvals from the client progressively as well, okay? And stay on top of the project, and usually it runs pretty smooth if you can get to that level of due diligence, all right? All right, take care, and we'll talk to you a little later.